Okay, good day, people. Hope everyone is well. So I'm giving another shout out here. My most recent book is called How Non-Being Haunts Being, subtitled on Possibilities, Morality, and Death Acceptance. And this is the most recent installment of my promotional videos. Today I'm going to be talking about the phenomenon of errors. I think errors are such a great case to look at when we're talking about how non-being haunts being. And I'm going to get to the error discussion in a second. But just to remind everybody what's going on in this promotional series, I'm trying to see how many people I can get to get this book in their local libraries. I have below a list of a directory of libraries throughout the US. Contact your local library, ask them to get it. I would love to see how many libraries we can get this into and help people get access to it. It is a little bit expensive. And so uh, if you want to order, if you have the cash, you want to order it, I do have a link for the publisher. You can buy it directly from the publisher and get a 30% discount off. That would be fine. Again, you have lots of money, you want to buy them as gifts, please feel free to do that. Also, there is a book club that has been started up and is going to, I think, begin in May. And that was Jermaine Martinez, who is a former student and I guess now a colleague. He's down in Arizona. They're going to start, I think, reading one chapter at a time in May, and then they're going to do them 2 weeks at per chapter, and then they're going to do Zoom sessions. And I'm going to try to be involved in that. I got to find out more about dates and times. They're going to decide all that when they see how many people are involved. So if you are interested, also check in the link below if you want to get involved in that reading group. Okay, so as I said, I want to talk a little bit about errors today. I mean, errors are such a great exemplar of how non-being haunts being. And I did have a lot more in the book originally on errors, and I ended up kind of weeding it down to just, several examples and points to try to illustrate, I think a simple and yet somewhat profound claim that errors are evidence of our experience, of our intentions. Now, we don't have to make any kind of claim to a superlative free will, but there does seem to be a sense in which we have something like the temporal openness to our own agency and decision making, right? That we're aware of what we want to happen and what we don't want to happen. And we try to deal with either one of those, right? Making things happen, avoiding things happening. And if we fail in either regard, we can go, oh, we had an error. It, didn't work out as we wanted it to. Now, someone could, again, they could try to just claim that there is nothing but a concatenated sequence of deterministic causes at all points all the way down, and that we're in error believing that we experience error. And then at a certain point, it starts to just not make sense. I think the more that we really look at practical cases. Now, if you're out in the biological world, some of it gets, again, very difficult to talk about, genetic variation. Is that an error or is it just variation? And I think some people would say, well, you look at a birth defect, it looks like it was an error. And other people go, well, there are no errors out in the world. It's just variation, blah. And we could have the haggle. I mean, there is senses in which redundancy is built into information systems in order to catch errors at different ways. I'm going to leave that. I want to go to the symbolic realm of the human because I think it illustrates it just really solidly. I'm going to go to just one case here, a very simple example of trying to write a grammatically correct sentence, right? Okay, so here's the exemplar case that we're just going to try to walk through somewhat quickly here. But now, there's the statement. The statement is there are exactly 3 errors in this statement. Okay, now I think what's interesting about this is that in some way you have to know spelling and grammar and other kinds of things in order to even register the errors. There are some people who right now are looking at this, they may not even see any errors there at all, again depending upon their ability to spell, their ability to see complexities in grammar and or in utterances and statements. But if we start with this here, right? I mean, we go to the somewhat obvious one. The word there is misspelled, right? The word there, it should be spelled, right? What is it? T-H-E-R-E. It should be spelled there. Now, it's funny on this, when we start to talk about what an error is, notice how the errorness of the error isn't reducible down to the visible plane of what can be seen. Like we could try to think about it that way, at least initially, and that's going to make some sense to say, well, yeah, well, we're looking just there at the words. But when we ask, well, what is the error in the word there, this one that's been underlined? Well, it could be talked about in different ways. That is, the errorness of it could be identified by way of thought. Again, it's thought that's imagining how it could be otherwise than it is, how it could be corrected from being incorrect. But in saying how it could be corrected, I could call it a misspelled word and say, this is the way the word is correctly spelled. So in that sense, it looks like a single error. But because errors are disclosed by thought, that is, by thought which is able to see things as other than they are and as they could be or might be, I could say it as, well, it's actually it's a misspelling, but it was a typo. Rather than the wrong word being printed there, they had an extra I and forgot the E. So it's as if there were two different errors, an inclusion of an I and an absence of an E, rather than, again, at a different level of analysis called the misspelled word. And it sounds so tedious to differentiate between the misarrangement of letters and just categorically saying the word is misspelled, but it points to the fact that the errorness of the error has to do with the way the imagination takes up what's visually there and is going to deal with, again, the sentence in terms of its possibilities for rewriting and rearrangement. Now, we go to our second error. Now, hopefully people can see that there is a second error there, and our second error right here is our, right? That in this case, right, what we have is the person should have had, right? It should say something like are, right? There are exactly 3 errors in this statement. And we can do the same kind of analysis here with, is it just, 2 extra letters that weren't supposed to be there and 2 that are, and were they not given the right arrangement? I think it doesn't matter so much as the point is that when we're saying that non-being haunts being, we're saying that the visual field discloses what is right there before us, and we can see it clearly. But with our mind, with our thoughts, right? Thoughts deal with possibilities. Again, thought is a kind of time that inherently traffics in possibilities. And so our thought, while we're reading the statement, we're able to ask questions about what's there in terms of what could be there or what ought to be there. Oftentimes, right, we're writing a sentence in a quick way. We didn't even notice that we made a misspelling or a typo, and then we go back and we correct it, right? So it's the ability to see what's there in terms of what could be there or what might be there. It's not just a reductive looking at the present items. There has to be, again, an infection of what's not there, at least as a possibility, in order to register the error as an error. Now, when we get to this question of, okay, well, I think it's pretty clear. We got our 1 error and we got our second error, but where's that third error? Right? Where's that third error in the statement? Now, anybody? My guess is some people are already guessing. You know what the third error is, right? The third error is that there are actually only 2 errors in the statement. Yeah, the third error is that there are only 2 errors in the statement. So the question then would be, are there 3 errors or aren't there? Like, if it says there are exactly 3 errors in this statement, and we leave that sentence untouched, we don't make the correction of these first 2 words, we just allow the statement to be what it is, right? Let's see if I can I do that? Oh, I don't know if I can undo that. Well, if I okay, there are exactly 3 errors in this statement, right? If we just leave it right there, right? And we We get rid of these. Now, are there three errors or aren't there? See, I think it's easy to say, well, okay, the first word, okay, that one is misspelled. That one is misspelled. Okay, the third error is that there are only actually two errors. I guess what we see here, right, is that thought, not just in dealing with the words that are in front of us on the paper, but in dealing with the sense of the statement as a whole. That is, the meaning of the statement as a whole is not only much more abstract and not locatable and specifiable in the particular words that we can see. Again, the meaning of the utterance seems to occur at a much different level of abstraction than the meaning of the meaning of the statement is occurring at a much different level of abstraction than the meaning of the words. But when you go to that question of the third, we get this very paradoxical a kind of transformational hierarchy where if there are only two errors, then the third error is the statement that there are three errors. But if there are if the third error is the fact that there are only two, then there really are three. But then if there really are three, then it isn't really an error. And we can start to see that thought in dealing with possibilities is open to the paradoxical relations of non-being, of what's not there being haunting what's there, not just at the level of the physical characters we can see printed before us, but at the level of sense. And we could say, well, wait, no, that doesn't make any sense. See, once we start to say that something doesn't make sense or I don't understand, or it oscillates between being both true and false, and that's one of the ways we talk about a paradox, right? Paradoxes are both true in one sense and false in another, and it depends on whether they're oscillating. And again, this is a pretty interesting case of a paradox. I think at the very least, it shows that amidst the being of the letters and the words and the statements, there is something like non-being haunting it all the way along. It's the way that thought, in terms of possibilities, addresses whether something is correct or not, right? Our awareness of the possibility of it being incorrect means that we're able to think about things other than they are, and we're thinking about them in terms of how they could be or should be or ought to be. Right. Okay, people, I think that's enough for today. And please get involved in that reading group. Get this book in your local library. And I'm looking forward to talking to people more about the text. Okay, thanks.